Paltrocast now with Darren Paltrowitz. Get ready to listen to your favorite artists.
Paltrocast.
Well, Katie, how's your day going besides answering the same questions over and over and over and over?
My day's going great. And you know what? I don't mind answering the same questions over and over because at least I start to feel a little bit more confident in my answers, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. And you have a few job titles related to Weak Layers. Did you know that you wanted to do so much in the project when you started on it?
No, I don't think so. I think that in some ways, as we were writing, it became kind of clear to Andrew, my co-writer, and I that Cleo was becoming increasingly sort of semi-autobiographical. And when we did when the producers were reading it and we did a lot of, exploration calls with them, the way that they would hear me reading it and the way that they would hear me talking about it, they felt like I was their Cleo. And I felt like I can't do both. I can't do it all. But at the same time, I felt so close to the story that I decided that if I was surrounded properly by, the team that came together, I could pull it off because I was more so directorially a vision holder. And then from a performance standpoint, it was just really about letting go of myself to be able to be this like deep like core of me in Cleo. And so it was kind of this like putting on and off of a jacket that I felt like as the director and actor, because it was like I had to take the jacket off to be the actor and play like a more vulnerable, stripped down, bared version of myself. And then I had to put the jacket back on and be a more confident, sort of stronger version of myself, to be the vision holder. And so everything really is as a result of having the support that I did from my producers to give me the confidence to go for it.
You said director and actress, but there was also writer, producer. Were you also involved with craft services, stunts, transportation, and other titles as well?
Oh yeah. I mean, on indies, you got to do it all. It's like bootstrapping a tech startup. Like it's all hands on deck for everything. And I think that ethos, A, is a lot of fun in production, and B, ends up being kind of contagious amongst the crew, and people feel like they do have the space to step up in other areas that might interest them. I mean, I will say like Christy Ryan, who came to set as a PA and left production, having been a second AC, a stunt skier, and having a line in the movie because we needed to insert her to a moment. That was kind of the way that we all had to tackle things, and that was what made it really special and feel really electric, really, was having that kind of energy. Got it.
So where was the movie filmed? Because these days you never know, things say Vegas and it's really New Mexico, or things say Louisiana and it's really Canada. You never know these days. So where was Weak Layers filmed?
Weak Layers says Tahoe, and we were in Tahoe. I don't know if we ever say Tahoe in the movie, but we filmed the entire thing in North Lake Tahoe and at Palisades. So Palisades, Tahoe, their ski hill there. And then in the backcountry surrounding that area for some of the ski action as well as some of the scenes. But the lake you see is Lake Tahoe, and the ski hill is Palisades. And I think that having Tahoe play a sort of character as environment felt really important to the story. I think originally we had thought we would shoot in Canada in a ski town similar called Revelstoke, but it's so remote that traveling talent in and out was just getting like to be super complicated when we were putting that together. And looking at Tahoe and starting to, so the producers brought me down on a location scout to Tahoe to see if I could visualize it there. And as soon as I got there, I was like, this is it. This is the spot. They were so connected there already that in terms of bringing in other members of the community, extras, and the way that Palisades got on board in such a, not just like cut us a check and we'll see if we can get you on the mountain. But they were like, we will shut down a chairlift to the public for you to shoot your final scene. We will, get you guys on the tram before the public so that we can shoot a scene in the tram. We will go back and forth with you on creative that scares the shit out of us from a marketing standpoint, because we believe in the spirit of making movies in Tahoe and being creative here. And so Tahoe ended up being such an excellent choice. And I think that it adds like a really beautiful backdrop visually to the story as well. Plus we got hit with crazy amounts of snow, and the $15,000 worth of snow blankets never had to come out of the cube van.
Being a big music person, I know there's a lot of classic rock musicians who live in Tahoe. There's David Coverdale from Whitesnake. There's Mike Love for the Beach Boys. 1 or 2 members of Creedence Clearwater Revival are there. Any of that on your radar whatsoever? And it's fine if the answer is no.
Well, I didn't know that they lived there, but I felt like music was so important in developing our soundtrack, because the way that ski movie, like traditional ski porn, they call it, ski movies work, is that they have these epic kind of soundtracks that really carry you from one segment to the next. And I wanted the movie to feel almost segmented in a sense like that, where tonally the music gives you the cue as to what the energy of the place should be, or of the scene should be. And we had an excellent music supervisor by the name of Dave Curtin, who phoned in some really fun favors. And we actually talked a lot about having a sort of 80s, 90s classic rock nostalgia kind of feel to the music. And we ended up going in a different direction because we wanted this to feel like a progressive throwback. Mm-hmm. So because of the stylistic sort of choices we were making in terms of buddy comedy bordering into rom-com territory and sort of blending those two genres, having a very sort of semi-stereotypical male, villain kind of character, we wanted the music to feel like it was really modern and progressive and gave you a window into like today's feeling in a ski town and not necessarily like yesteryear's feeling in a ski town. So that was a choice.
Yeah, some of these ski towns are real foodie destinations, to say the least. I don't say it in a pejorative way. I mean, there's concerts and there's foodie stuff. In other words, skiing is one of the things you do there. It's not just you only go to ski and you're bored out of your mind otherwise.
Totally. And I think that Tahoe in particular has got a really fun kind of community vibe outside of just skiing. There's great restaurants, there's the lake, there's cross-country skiing and biking and hiking. And I know that Chelsea Conwright, who played Tina, is a big foodie, and she was on a mission while she was not on set to find the best burger in Tahoe. She went to the River Rock, she went to the Plump Jack, she went to the Tap House. And I mean, those were businesses that were helping us in production as well. Nice. And she explored all over the place, sampling various burgers across Tahoe.
It's hard work. I get it.
Mm-hmm. It's tough.
Your star there. Well, the last question before I let you go, and I don't know if this is under an embargo thing or I just have to follow you on social media and to know, but are we allowed to know what's next from you? Because when we look at IMDb, let's face it, this movie dominates your IMDb right now. And some people wait to add their next project. So again, are we allowed to know what's next from you, Katie?
I am currently in development on a handful of different things. I love this comedy, action, sports combined space. I'm working. I've just newly been brought in on a project I can't really talk about it, but in the ice hockey world. Cool. And I also wrote a script with Evan, who played Gabe, my co-star in the rom part of the rom-com, not rom-com. And he and I wrote a script that's a coming of age story about an American girl who spends the summer in France. So it's a total departure from anything I've ever done. But I mean, I'm hopeful that Weeklers is a bit of a calling card for me, frankly, not to be too transparent about my strategic approach to my career here and lift the veil of the whatever wizard behind the operating mechanics of it. But sure. This is the first feature, and so much of the content that I've done beforehand has been online marketing based brand content, sketches, etc. So to make this jump has been astronomical, for like an astronomical lift for me. And so I'm really hoping that I can use it to sort of be like a wedge, a pinky toe in the door that allows me to have the space really to explore these other ideas and concepts that I have. And so we'll see, but I'm really interested in the opportunity to further develop myself in this comedy action sports space, but also try things outside of it.
I'm looking forward to that next project, whatever it is. And congrats on seeing Weak Layers through with your vision, wearing multiple hats. Great job.
Thank you so much, Darren. I really appreciate it.
Paltrocast.
Okay, the first question I have for you, do I still call you Matisse? Matisse, how do you like to be called?
Most people call me Matis. Yeah.
Well, Matisse, thank you for your time. I assume the Super Bowl was not a big part of your weekend plans, or am I wrong there?
I did watch the Super Bowl. I watched it at my manager's house. I'm in Austin, Texas, and he's based here. So, yeah, I went and watched the game. But, yeah, not that big a deal, really. I do love football, but I'm a Giants fan. So
I'd have to imagine that Austin is like the second city for you, because the Stubbs Barbecue EP and live recording and all that is kind of what launched the whole thing for you.
Exactly. Exactly. Kind of a full circle moment for me. I have my 17-year-old son out with me, Shalom, who is performing a song every night. His older brother, Levi, was out with me on the last tour, is now in Israel in Yeshiva. So at Live at Stubbs 2, during the intro, you'll see like I have Yehuda Solomon comes out and blows the shofar, and my boys are backstage, and Shalom is like, I don't know, this is 14 years ago, right? So he must be 3 years old. And I had like all this Kabbalah that I was learning, and I had them saying the Kabbalah like into the microphone, as the band is playing, going through all these delays and stuff. And then I'm back here with my son, 14 years later, and he's performing on the same stage with me. And we open up the show the same way. So yeah, it's been like 15 years or more. What was Live at Stubbs 2 was 2. We're almost at 20 years. And it was funny. I remember like when they wanted to do that, it was weird. 15 years, is it?
15 years ago.
Since
12.
No. Since the original, since 2000.
I think it was a 2005 release.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So almost 20. I hate to break it to you that it's aging, but in a good way, which means that next year you could tour it as the 20th anniversary.
Exactly. So we'll probably do that, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, Austin, I remember when I first, signed my first record deal, and I was working with a guy named Michael Kaplan, who had signed this band Los Lonely Boys, and they were out of Austin, Texas, and he had just recorded their album in Texas. So he's like, all right, let's record in Austin. This is a music city. And for a lot of people, Matisyahu, you don't want this live album like live at the JCC, you're live at Shlomo's bar mitzvah. Like, you want this at Stubbs in Austin, Texas, so that the rest of the world kind of takes you maybe it will take you a little more seriously about it. So, and yeah, Austin's always been a special place for me to come back to because of Stubbs. It's always been special for me.
Well, one more question about that, and then we'll talk about Hold the Fire and what's coming up and all that. And that's when a lot of people get to play Stubbs, they're kind of bragging about the great barbecue food that they got to eat. But back then, I cannot imagine you were eating the food at Stubbs.
No, I wasn't eating the food at Stubbs. I remember seeing the barbecue sauce in the supermarket. I'm like, is this kosher? But no, I wasn't eating the food. And in those early days, it was actually very, very tough. It's interesting because, the Jews, the Orthodoxy really wanted to make a very clear distinction and a separation between Jews and non-Jews. Mm-hmm. And one of the main ways of doing that is kosher food. So for me on tour, I was never able to eat the food that the venue had. I was never able to eat the food that the rest of the band was eating. If everyone was going out to dinner with the promoter, I was by myself in my hotel room taking plastic wrapping off of something. And I was by myself, I wasn't with a community of Jews, so I was alone, and it didn't really work for me, so in some ways, when I stopped keeping kosher, I kind of started kind of becoming more a part of the world. This is a good lead up to probably where we're going. And the
Well,
last 10 years
yeah.
of my life have been less about separating myself from the rest of the world and more about being part of the world. And I kind of like when I first started out, I kind of was like I was punk rock in the sense that I felt like the world was empty and shallow and Judaism had everything to offer. And so therefore I was like all focused on that. And then as time went on, I shaved my beard and all of that. I started to feel like, well, why am I have to be separate from the rest of the world? Why do I have to make this distinction between myself? I know who I am. I know I love God. I know I'm Jewish. And so I started to integrate more with the world, and even my music Judaism became less of the focal point. It became more about being a human being, being a father, being a spouse, being a husband, addiction, ups, downs, pain, suffering, joy, all of the just human things, and less from the canon or the context of the Jewish perspective. And since October 7th, you're getting the old Matisyahu back. You're going that fire. That's sort of like, okay, yeah. Here's the reminder: the world sucks. They will kill us and murder us and rape our children and keep us hostages the first second they get, and then they will defend them. The rest of the world will defend those people against us. And so, yeah, now I'm like back into being Jewish, big time, baby.
Yeah, the new music keeps coming. The tours keep coming. So it's very interesting for me to see, for lack of a better term than interesting, about how you are yourself, you get to be yourself, and it doesn't so much matter if you're writing hit songs because they're coming to see you at this point in your career. You could play 3 hours and they're happy with that. When did you kind of realize that it was no longer about hit singles?
Well, I come from the jam band world in the sense that like the first concert I ever went to was 1981 New Year's Grateful Dead. I was 1 year old, 2 years old. My parents were Deadheads in Oakland Coliseum. And then in the 90s, my first shows that I went to were Fish shows.
Right.
And so I'm a huge Fish head, and improvisational music is the big aspect of the part of music that I fell in love with and always wanted to create. And as a singer, that's not really too typical, but I also love reggae music. I also love hip hop. I also love pops. I love hits, pop songs, and I love hits. So for me, it's like all these different pieces. Now, like you said, being on the road and grinding like 200 days a year, I start to lose the joy in singing those songs. 3-minute versions of One Day or King Without a Crown. Those songs are old. I'm already moved on to different types of music. I'm constantly listening to music and kind of growing. So basically, I just decided, like, if I'm not enjoying it, then I'm going to start changing things, expanding them, improvising in these songs, to the point where oftentimes you couldn't even figure out that those were the original songs. And like you say, there are, and also emotionally and stuff on stage, I've gone through a lot of stuff. And I was never of the idea that I should, like, now it's showtime. You put all that away and you put on your shiny clothes and you go out and make people feel good. I was always like, I'm going through this shit and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to put it out there. And I've had certain fans that, like you said, came to me and said, like, we love that about you. That's why we come to your shows, because it's interesting, because we know you're going through something and you're going to be real with us. And we want to go through that with you. And there were shows where I was like, on LSD, and I would completely fall apart during the show and then rebuild back up in front of the audience with the audience,
Wow.
These redeeming moments. I don't really do that too much anymore, but I did go through a place of just really wanting to play with musicians that aren't parts players, but are improvisers. Mm-hmm. And that is really the core of who I am. And that is really where I find myself the most happy. And if I am on stage and I'm upset, that follows me into my week, like if I feel like I didn't deliver something real, something true. So the improvisation and all of that has been a huge part. But I will say that as I've gotten older, I've gone back. I've listened to those songs that people love. I've looked at their faces when I sing those songs, and I've learned how to feel the joy that they feel about the music. And so I do now play a mixture. My set is more of it's less of just a a jam and more of a combination of playing those hit songs, playing reggae songs, doing some jam, doing some improvising, having my moment where I get in touch with my Judaism and all of that spirituality. So it's more of a blended thing going on now with the shows, which I think is a better show for the average Matisyahu fan.
Yeah. Well, being a longtime follower of your work, right now you're doing pretty much theaters and Israel. In prior years, we've seen, hey, he's doing the Live Nation Shed Tour co-bills with 311 and that kind of stuff. So you're very adaptable in that residencies and amphitheaters and theaters and large clubs. And hey, he's going to play an Olympics thing. So now we have to do kind of a corporate thing and watch what we're saying. Yes. You're very adaptable with all that. So what I'm curious about, sometimes the song that we love from you is 5 minutes long live, and sometimes it's 9 or 10 minutes long. Are there hand signals going on? Is there one or two people on the stage in the band who's going, this is the vibe, watch me? And I'm not asking who that is, but how do you know when to stop the song or to keep extending it?
I try to feel it out. And the feeling it out is a combination of the band, myself, and the audience. I would say the band first. So like if we open up, let's say, a guitar solo in King Without a Crown, and Aaron is soloing and he's telling a story, I'm going to want the band to pick up on that. And if I'm playing with sensitive musicians, like real musicians, then nothing needs to be said. When Aaron's finished with that solo, he will let everyone know. We're following the story. We're listening to the story. We're not going to end the story in the middle of it, because of a time constraint. We want to hear the end of the story, and we can tell when he's coming to the end of the story. That's like one type of jam. But then there's other types of jams where it's not just a solo and playing over the same chords, but it's like, to me, a jam really is when you start a story in one place and you move through different terrain, you move through different atmosphere, like you're on an airplane or you're taking a hike or you're on a motorcycle. Now you're in the desert, now you're in the mountains, now you're down by the ocean. Mm-hmm. Those are the feelings that people have when they're listening. So if you have a great band that can tell the story and doesn't feel rushed and is brave, like they have to have balls. They have to not care what the audience thinks, because there's going to be times when the audience is like, what is this? And you're just like, stay with us. We're going to bring you out of this. We're going to scoop you up. And you can't really go up until you go down. Like if we just play major chords and sing in this high register and about peace the whole time, that is not a human experience. So we want to deliver.
To rudely interrupt you here, you're talking about dynamics.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, the main thing was finding musicians that have dynamics and are brave. And when you have players like that, then you can sort of say like, okay, well, this is the kind of thing I want to do. Let's try this out tonight, and everyone's attentive. Now, in the space that we're in now, I can't afford to tour most of the time with those musicians. Tour bus prices, everything went skyrocketing high. My ticket numbers aren't like they didn't jump or anything like that. I'm still playing for 500 to 1,500 people a night.
It seems like, as an outsider, it seems like it's more than that. I think you're underselling your draw right there.
Well, thank you very much. But I feel like I've had to, not always play with musicians on that level. And then when I'm not, so then I kind of have to take more of a teacher kind of, role, in the sense of like, okay, like don't rush the solos, like when you're playing, like think about where can you change the chords? Can you pedal? Can you stay on one chord and just sit there? Then everyone has to listen and we all have to be attentive. And where are we going from here? So it's kind of like I start trying to teach a little bit about that. On this tour, I brought someone to do that with me. I brought Aaron Dugan back into the band, and he is an improvisational master and someone who really cares nothing about nothing else other than the music. So having him, and he speaks the language. I'm not a musician, so he actually knows the terminology. So between the two of us, we're working on the band and trying to help them to understand about improvisation and dynamics and all of those things. Because, there's a lot of great bands and musicians out there that just don't have that kind of background,
Sure. Well, two quick questions and then I let you go. And the first one is, hold the fire. is the new EP, and 2 or 3 of the tracks came out before it was released. Are you already thinking about your next EP or album, or are you good for a while on the studio stuff?
No, I have 40 songs that I recorded last year, and these are just the first 5. So I'm going to be releasing another song called Ascent in March. I wrote about anti-Semitism. It's like the Shir Amalos prayer. And I wrote it after Kanye. I made the video in Israel with the Nova survivors, and it's a super powerful piece. And that's next up. So hopefully that will be out early March. And then it's just a matter for me if I make a record deal, someone who wants to put out a whole album. And if not, then I'm just going to keep releasing music, whether it's in an EP form or just the single form. But you'll get a new track from me, God willing, from here on in, every month or 2 months. And, my whole attitude changed about that. Like I used to think that the Jamaican artists were always very prolific in the sense they would be putting out tons and tons of albums, It's like anyone who would pay them, here's some cash, give me an album. And they will do it. It's like, oh, this kind of funny way of doing things. But, you have these artists that would put out so much music, and then you would be disappointed because you would feel like it wasn't really all that. It was like, how could it be? And so I started thinking okay, so I get I have an album's worth of material in me every 3 years, maybe, it takes 3 years to build up the life experience and to have what to say. And then the music you're listening to really soak in. So, which way you're going. And then I started now watching a lot of young artists and thinking man, who says that you only have one album in you every 3 years? Why? That's just some mental thing that you've made up for yourself.
It's literally rudely interrupt you.
Yeah, please.
As a person that comes from the music industry and the background and all that, you'll hear publicists go, well, it's got to be a 3-month setup for the PR campaign. You go, why? So you're on retainer?
Yeah.
There's so many things that you're told that you go, who made that one up?
Yeah, the setup. There's the setup, and then it would take all this time to make the deal and the artwork and all of that. It's no, actually, we can do all of that ourselves in a matter of moments. Now, and and also just the idea that you only have so much creativity in you is not a real idea. Where's that based in? Where does that come from? It's actually not true. It's actually you. But a big part of it to me is the collaborative part of it, right? Because it is true, you're only going to have a certain amount of inspiration. So on these last group of 40 songs that I did is I worked with probably 100 people altogether, writers, producers, other singers, other rappers, just getting in a room with 5-6 people playing the song and then all of us writing over the top of it and exchanging things. That's a new thing for me. And to me, that's that's how you're able to really create a lot of material in a short period of time if you're willing to collaborate and work with other people, So that's been the case. So, yeah.
Paltrow.